Dear students, I welcome you all to the concluding session on Francis Bacon. As I promised you, today we would complete the essay of truth, and then we will discuss what are the salient features of Bacon's style. We will also discuss the other significant points from Bacon's point of view. So, without saying much, because then we will summarize also in the last. I start the remaining part of the essay. Now, in this part of the essay, Bacon talks about the truth related to the civil business. Earlier, he talked about the truth belonging to the field of philosophy and theology, or he talked about the theological or philosophical truth earlier. And now, in this concluding paragraph, he talks about the truth that belongs to the civil business or to the common man or to the truth that is concerned with routine life. To pass from theological and philosophical truth to the truth of civil business, it will be acknowledged even by those that practice it not, that clear and round dealing is the honor of man's nature. Now, the essayist says that I have talked about the theological and the philosophical truth, and now from that truth, I pass on to the truth belonging to the civil business or the routine life of an individual. It will be acknowledged even by those that practice it not, that clear and round dealing is the honor of man's nature. And he says, it goes without saying, and it will be admitted even by those who do not practice it, who do not practice the truth, that clear and round dealing commands honor. Clear and round dealing commands honor. And that mixture of falsehood is like alloy in coin of gold and silver. And thereafter he makes an observation and he says, mixture of falsehood is like alloy. It's like alloy. He says, when you are mixing a lie or falsehood with the truth, then this falsehood is working like the alloy. Now, what is the how does the alloy work? He says, although when you mix the alloy in the metal, it baseth the nature of the metal, but then it makes the metal work better. वह कहता है कि जब हम फॉल्सहुड उस अलॉय की तरह से है, उस एलोह धातु की तरह से है, जिसको हम अगर किसी मेटल में मिला देते हैं तो वो मेटल अच्छी तरह से काम करता है, लेकिन उस मेटल की क्वालिटी डिग्रेड हो जाती है. And that mixture of falsehood is like alloy in coin of gold and silver. He makes a comparison and he says, then when you are mixing the alloy in a coin of gold and silver, the metal will work better. But at the same time, the quality of the metal will lower down. It will baset the quality of the metal. For these winding and crooked courses are the goings of the serpent. And then he talks about it and he says that when we talk about the lies, these lies are like the winding and the crooked courses, and they can be compared to the working of a serpent. A serpent is usually supposed to be crooked and winding because the way it sits. And he says, therefore, the person who believes in falsehood, they are the people who are crooked, who believes as the serpent, who encircles you in the same way as a serpent sits in the uncircled circle. For these winding and crooked courses are the goings of the serpent, which goeth basely upon the belly and not upon the feet. And then he makes a beautiful comparison and he says that as far as the working of the serpent is concerned, the serpent, when he when he crawls, how does he crawl? He crawl upon the belly and not upon the feet. And thereby what he means to say, जैसा कि हम हिंदी में कहते हैं कि झूठ के पैर नहीं होते, the same thing is being communicated by Bacon here to the readers. He says that a lie is always baseless. A lie does not have very strong feet, like the serpent doesn't have any feet. It walks on on the that is the whole load is there on the belly, and then it crawls on the floor. There is no vice that doth so cover a man with shame as to be found false and perfidious. Now, talking about the practical aspect of speaking falsehood or taking recourse to falsehood, the essayist says that there is no demerit which can be compared to the demerit of speaking a lie. There is no vice that doth so cover a man with shame as to be found false and perfidious. He says that there is no guilt, that there is no demerit as the demerit of speaking a lie, because when the person is caught red handed, he has to face the amount of shame that he has to face will be immense. The amount of shame that he has to face will be immense. And therefore, he says that this is one of the greatest vices. And therefore, Montaigne said prettily, as I talked about Montaigne earlier, Montaigne was a French philosopher and essayist. Now he also wrote essays, and there are a lot of things which Bacon has borrowed from him. So basically, he is a French philosopher and essayist. Bacon is quoting him here, and therefore Montaigne said prettily, beautifully. Said, and therefore Montaigne has said very beautifully, when inquired the reason why the word of the lie should be such a disgrace and such an odious charge. And therefore Montaigne said prettily, when he inquired the reason why the word of the lie should be such a disgrace and such an odious charge. He argued, what did he say? He inquired the reason that why the people think that lie brings such a disgrace, and it is supposed to be a very disgraceful charge. He inquired, he explored, he went deep into the exploration of these regions, and what were these reasons he tried to find out as to how it is that speaking a lie brings such a disgrace. Saith he, if it be well weighed, to say that a man lieth is as much as to say that he is brave towards God. And he concluded with the statement that if a person decides to speak a lie and takes recourse to it, it means he has been brave to God. He has been brave to God and to covert towards his fellow human beings. वो कहता है कि वो आदमी बहादुरी दिखाता है ईश्वर के सामने तो और अपनों के सामने डरपोकपन दिखाता है. And thereby what he is saying that he is deceiving himself, he is exposing himself before the God and even to his fellow human being also. A covert towards man for a lie faces God. And here brave means rude. Brave does not mean brave in that sense, but brave has been used in the sense of rudeness. So the person who takes recourse to lie has been rude to the God, and he has been he has been a coward towards his fellow human beings. For a lie traces, for a lie faces God and shrinks from man, because he says, for a lie faces God and shrinks from man, because what he does, he has been rude to God because he has endeavored to face the God, and because he is afraid of man. He has endeavored to face the God because he is afraid of man. Surely the wickedness of falsehood and breach of faith cannot possibly be so highly expressed as in that it shall be the last peal. Peal means appeal to call the judgments of God upon the generations of man. Surely the wickedness means viciousness. The viciousness of falsehood and breach of faith, breach means break of faith cannot possibly be so highly expressed as in that it shall be the last peal to call the judgments of God upon the generations of man. He says that the crime that a common man does by taking recourse to lie is can be that is the judgment for speaking a lie will be taken, means the judgment as to what should be awarded to the person who has spoken a lie will be taken only at the level of God. So what it is, he says that there is no other cell of appeal except that of the God. The liar has to appeal, has to file a suit only in the court of God, and it is from there only that automatically the judgment will flow. And therefore, what he means to say, he means to say that there is no other way out, but confession is the only way out. The person has to go in the court of judgment, in the God's court of judgment, and there he has to confess. As in that, it shall be the last peal to call the judgments of God upon the generations of man, it being foretold that when Christ cometh, he shall not find faith upon the earth. And therefore, it was being said, it was because of the faithlessness, it was because of the falsehood that has breeded on the earth that Christ has to come on this earth. And what Christ found on the earth, that the truth and the other things did not exist here at all. And thereafter, the essay comes to an end. Now, look at the way, basically, when we talk about the style of Bacon, there are certain things which this essay very beautifully represents, and therefore, after having talked about after having summarized, or after having explained this essay, now I am going to talk about the style of Bacon, or Bacon's style. We have studied four essays of Bacon, and these essays are of revenge, of adversity, of marriage and single life, and the fourth one of truth that we have completed today. On the basis of these four essays, we have to make an observation about Bacon's style. And therefore, when we look at these four essays of Bacon, we find that the style of Bacon is distinct. It is distinct from others in several ways. And Sainsbury said that it is marvelously distinct. And therefore, the style of Bacon cannot be compared with the essays or with any other essayist. Now, when we talk about the style, we are talking about the way a writer decides to write. How does he write? And therefore, when we talk about the style component, we are commenting on the how part of it. But then when we talk about it, let us say that the comment on the style should not be simply impressionistic, but it must be supported by the data. For example, when I read that the style is very appealing and therefore I say that the style is very appealing and it is very poetic also, without giving any data, what I am doing, I am trying to make the statement in the vacuum. And therefore, as a student of literature, whenever we write something, we should support it by the data, and our data are the statements or the essays or the sentences that we have studied as the part of Bacon's essays. Therefore, when we talk about style, we talk about the way of doing the things. And here, because Bacon is a writer, and therefore, when we talk about style, we talk about way of writing. Now, how does Bacon write, or how has Bacon written his essays? We will be commenting upon that. Now, if you look at the essays of Bacon, you will find, as I have said already, that Bacon's style is distinct, and therefore his style cannot be compared with any other writer. Moreover, the essays that he has written, they belong to the varied fields, and therefore in a way the style that has been used by the essayist sometimes may sound to be varied, means different from one essay to the another essay. But then there are certain things which can be commonly observed in all the essays of Bacon. Now I am going to talk about those distinct features which are found in almost all the essays of Bacon. Now, number one, when we look at the essays of Bacon, we will find that his essays or his style, they reflect the characteristics of the age. And when we talk about the characteristics of the age, now Bacon was also a Renaissance figure, and therefore you will find that there is an impact of Renaissance on Bacon's essays. Renaissance has inculcated in man the spirit of inquiry. Not only this, but even the spirit of pragmatism. He inculcated the spirit of pragmatism also, and thereby he tried to conclude that when we talk about this pragmatism, we talk about the utilitarian view of life, and this utilitarianism you will find in almost every essay of Bacon. And this utilitarianism comes to the apex in the essay of truth when he says mixing falsehood is like mixing alloy in the metal, because he says it makes the metal work better, although it makes the quality of the metal base. In the same way, he is he is saying that same thing is true about the person who speaks the truth, but sometimes what a person can do, a person can take recourse to a little lie also. Now here, that is why sometimes some of the people have said that the essays written by Bacon, they are the instruments of Machiavelli. Machiavelli believed in pragmatism, in utilitarianism, either by hook or by crook, and therefore there is crookedness that the essays of Bacon reflect. But if you look at the essays of Bacon, you will find that although he has been very practical, and therefore the things that he saw around, they reflect in the essays of Bacon But to say that they are the advices or the counsels of the crooked, it is simply to malign a writer, and therefore it cannot be considered true as far as Bacon is concerned. Right? So, this number one, point number one that you need to keep in mind. But then, yes, there are glimpses of the age. Man has become insightful, insightful in the sense that before accepting anything, he would like to make an inquiry, and thereafter, what he will do, he will also like the question to be answered. And what that question was, the question was, why should I do it? And basically, not for the sake of God, as the person before Renaissance would believe, but then how am I going to be benefited by this act? And therefore, both these things are reflected in the essays of Bacon. And therefore, Bacon's style, if you read even these four essays, you will find that these characteristics are well reflected in the essays of Bacon. And therefore, Bacon's essays represent the contemporary age. So, that is number one. Bacon's style is representative of the age because the pragmatism, the utilitarianism, the Renaissance spirit are well embodied into it, into the essays of Bacon. Now, if we look at the style of Bacon, then as I have said, Bacon very often said that my essays are scattered thoughts. I have not written anything which I can consider, which I can say with confidence that they are complete. And there was a reason for that. As I have already told you, Bacon is the father of empiricism also, and therefore it is not theorization, but it is the observation and the experimentation that takes a lead in the essays of Bacon. That takes a lead in the essays of Bacon, empiricism, empiricist approach of the Bacon that we can find in the essays of Bacon. Now, this empiricist approach is because the thoughts are scattered, but at the same time they relate to the same theme. The prose writer has not been very careful about the nuances of the style, but at the same time he has kept in mind that I will not get diverted from the topic, the idea on which I have decided to write. And therefore, the style of the essays, because the essays are the scattered thoughts on a given theme, Bacon's style tends to be empiricist because it is based on the observations and the experimentation that he made, the observations of human life and the experimentation that he made as the Attorney General or as Lord Chancellor of England. Now, another remarkable feature of Bacon's essays is that they are very illustrative. And when we talk about the illustration, we will find that Bacon says something and then either he provides the scripts from Latin, as was one of the trends of the contemporary time, that every idea would be supported by the sayings which were there in Latin. So Bacon cannot be an exception, and Bacon is not an exception of this. So everything that happens in the essays means whatever he writes, if he makes a statement, he makes it illustrative by taking examples from the Latin, by quoting from the Latin writings, and not only this, by taking recourse to metaphorical style and even by making use of similes. His comparisons are so striking that one tends to say that even in the routine Even the conversational language can be made so effective. The conversation language has been used by the prose writer, but then he has succeeded in making it so effective by making use of the illustration. And this illustration is supported either by the Latin sayings or by the metaphors and similes. And therefore, the style of Bacon tends to be illustrative. Now, the another significant point about Bacon's style, as I have talked about it earlier also, Bacon's style is objective and impersonal. I kept on telling you, even when I did the essays, that Bacon as an individual is not reflected in the essays that he has written. It is the objectivity and the impersonality that the that all the essays, that the objectivity and impersonality dominate the essays of Bacon. Subjectivity has no place in the essays of Bacon. There is no personal grievances. Bacon as an individual does not refer to himself in none of the essays. And therefore, the essays of Bacon are objective. The absence of the first person, either first person singular or the first person plural, make it very clear that Bacon's style is objective. Not only this, but he has not referred to the self in any other way also, although we can find the autobiographical strains in the essays of Bacon, like towards the end of his life, as I discussed with you, he was put into a disgrace because the charges of corruptions were leveled against him and he was given imprisonment. So that speaks of it, but then nobody can deny the fact that Bacon's essays are impersonal, and therefore impersonality and objectivity tend to be the most significant features of the essays of Bacon. Whether you talk about of revenge or of truth or of marriage and single life. Now, for example, even in the essays like of marriage and single life, which otherwise the title, if you read the title, it connotes something very subjective. But the prose writer, the essayist, rather than talking about the subjective things, he talks about the advantages and disadvantages of married life, vis-a-vis the single life. Advantages and disadvantages of married life and vis-a-vis the advantages and disadvantages of single life. Now, this is very remarkable. And how could Bacon do it? We people can simply think of that because we think that the essay, if we write an essay, it must be subjective, it must be personality or subjectivity must be one of the features like that of Charles Lamb. But Bacon's essays lack in it. Alright, there is no subjectivity, there is only objectivity, there is only impersonality. Means Bacon as a person is not found in the essays of Bacon. Now, the next very significant point about the style of Bacon is that if you make a minute observation of Bacon's essays, you will find that the style of Bacon, as I said to you, that the essays of Bacon are sometimes marked with two styles. Number one is the philosophical style, and the other one is the style belonging to or concerning the routine or concerning the general things or the things related to the common man or citizen. Now, when he is talking about dealing with the philosophical things, you will find that the content is very often supported by the Latin sayings. But when he's talking about the routine truth, then the content is supported by the comparisons. The content is supported by the comparisons, such as he will be making use of similes, such as he will be making use of metaphors, and so on and so forth. Now, this thing is found in the essays of Bacon. Now, and therefore, when we talk about, we can clearly diagnose, although the essays that we have studied, in these essays, there is no essay as such in which we find two styles of Bacon, but then there are essays like of love, in which you will find the philosophical style and the style which is concerned with a common man or commonality. Philosophical style, in the philosophical style, as I said, he tries to philosophize. And number two, very often the content is supported by the latent sayings. And in the case of the common man's style, that is not true. He takes recourse to the comparisons, and these comparisons are very often in the form of metaphors and similes. After having talked about all these things, one final point about Bacon's style is the abruptness. He just says, and abruptly. You think that something more will follow, but then all of a sudden they come to an end. Now, for example, in the case of truth, he ends the essay with the saying of Montaigne, and then he keeps on explaining the statement made by Montaigne. Now, therefore, keeps on making the statement. He makes the statement that this is what Montaigne has said about truth and lie. Then he explains it, and then the essay ends. The readers reading the essay comes to a sudden end, or the essay ends abruptly. The readers expect that something more will follow, but nothing follows. And therefore, abruptness is also one of the features of Bacon's essays. Abruptness of style is also one of the features of Bacon's essays. So let me summarize what I have said. The certain points which I have made, all these points are to be illustrated by you by giving examples or by quoting from the text of the essay which you have studied. So point number one, that Bacon's style is distinctive style, and therefore it cannot be compared with any other writer. Number two, Bacon's style is reflective of the age, because what we find that the spirit of Renaissance is imbued in it, and therefore you find that there are tones of pragmatism, there are tones of utilitarianism, and not only this, but then the Renaissance man has become very selfish. The Renaissance man wanted to know, why should I do it if I do it? And that spirit of why has been very beautifully inculcated in the essays of Bacon. So, number two, Bacon's style is reflective of the age in which he lived. Means it is reflective of the Renaissance spirit. Number three, Bacon's essay or Bacon's style is illustrative, and this illustration comes either from the Latin or from the beautiful comparisons in the form of metaphors and similes. Now, when I say illustration comes from Latin, I mean Latin saying and metaphorical style or the use of simile. This is the another feature of Bacon's style, that his essays are illustrative or his style is illustrative, And this illustration is brought about by the use of and Latin sayings, and then the use of metaphor and similes, and a lot of other sort of comparison also. Now, when we talk about Bacon's essays, as I said to you, they are the scattered thoughts, scattered meditations, and therefore you will not find that there is, because here you have to say that the style of Bacon is that of an empiricist, and therefore he said, what I have seen I have described, and therefore you may not expect something scholarly in the essays which I have written. You may not expect something scholarly in the essays which I have written. These were the statements made by Bacon. And therefore, what he says, or what we find in the essays of Bacon, that he emerges as an empiricist in his essays. And when we talk about empiricism, we have to say that his essays are dispersed meditations, as I said the other day. His essays are the scattered thoughts, and these scattered thoughts have been encapsulated on the basis of his practical observations and experiences. So his style is empiricist, that is the another feature of the style of Bacon. Now the another feature of his style is that Bacon's essays are objective and impersonal. Impersonality or objectivity, Bacon as a person is never reflected in the essays. Next feature, and this is true about all the essays. Then when you have a look at the essays, you will find that in some of the essays of Bacon, there are two styles which we find. Number one, the philosophical style, and number two, the style, the conversational style, or the style related to the the concerning common man's issues. But then in the four essays which are prescribed for us, this we don't find. The another feature that we find in the essays of Bacon is that usually they end abruptly. We expect several things. By the time they come to an end, the reader is not prepared for this abrupt ending. The reader is not prepared for this abrupt ending, and yet, he has to take recourse to it. The reader is not prepared for abrupt ending, and therefore sometimes this abrupt ending comes to the reader as a shock. He expects that I would learn more, I would be able to know more about the theme, but then he is disappointed. That is the another feature of Bacon's essay. The another feature of Bacon's essays is that they are not very poetic, and therefore, as far as the style is concerned, it's not very soothing. But the style is very prosaic and philosophical. Bacon is interested in giving argumentation and proving his point, and therefore the style is argumentative and prosaic. The style is argumentative and prosaic. One after the another argument follows, as you know why does it happen in the essays of Bacon? Because he was the Attorney General, and number two, he was the Lord Chancellor also. And therefore this argumentation is, or naturally, from a man of judiciary, argumentative spirit is bound to enter. And this is what we find in the essays of Bacon. The essays, as I have said already, they end abruptly. And finally, the most significant feature of Bacon's essays is that they are remarkable for brevity. If you look at the sentences which have been used by Bacon, usually the essays are not very long, but then the complexity of thought that these small sentences convey is a really really immense. Usually, when we talk about the linguistic phenomenon, we say that small essays or small sentences means that the ideas would be very simple and can be therefore easily comprehended by the common man. But when we look at the essays of Bacon, we will find that although the sentences are very small, but then the ideas that they carry, they are very complex, and then they can be explained in pages and pages. While talking about the theme of revenge in the essay of revenge, I said that Bacon has described the whole idea of revenge in just 6 words, which can be explained in pages and pages. And the same thing is true about several other essays also, in a way, about almost all the essays. So, brevity is one of the remarkable features of Bacon's essays, which made Bacon a very prominent writer of the contemporary times. So, these are the features which you need to keep in mind when you discuss Bacon as a writer. These are the features which you will need to discuss. Now, if there is any question, you can put your questions to me. Otherwise, I will tell you what are the common topics which you need to prepare from examination point of view as far as Bacon is concerned. Yes, any question? Okay. Now, if we look at Bacon's essays, we will find that basically there are two topics which we need to compare on Bacon. Number one, Bacon as an essayist or as a prose writer. Now, usually they will not be asking you Bacon as a prose writer because you have not studied the another book, The Advancement of Learning, that was published in the year 1605, written by Bacon. You have read simply the essays, and therefore they will be asking you only this question: discuss Bacon as an essayist. So, question number one that is very significant for you is discuss Bacon as an essayist, and therefore Bacon as an essayist. One very significant topic from examination point of view. Now, here you have to discuss all the features of Bacon as an essayist. Now, you have to begin again how his essays are scattered thought, how they are the dispersed meditations. Then, after having talked about this, you have to talk about the fact that they are what about you have to talk about the content of the essays, that how his essays are pragmatic and utilitarian, and therefore somebody said that they are the counsel of the crooked. They are the counsels or the advice given by the crooked people, and therefore they are Machiavellian in approach. You have to talk about that also, and you have to make some 3 4 paragraphs on this crookedness within quote unquote, which is reflected in the essays of Bacon. And then you have to put forward your own point of view also, whether you consider that this is really crookedness or you consider this that Bacon was very practical or he was describing the life as he saw it, and therefore that cannot be considered the crookedness of the writer. Right after having talked about this, you need to say, although he was not crooked, but then there are insinuations of pragmatism and utilitarianism found in the essays of Bacon. And almost every essay, whether this is of marriage and single life, or of truth, or let us say of revenge, or of adversity, or of truth, any essay you will find that the essays of Bacon, in a way, what they suggest, they are meant to give advice to the common man, and advice in the sense that this is how you can succeed in your life. So you can say that of course there are Machiavellian insinuations because he was born and brought up during the Renaissance period, and therefore the impact of the Renaissance time was bound to enter in the essays of Bacon. It, however, does not mean that Bacon Bacon did not bother, or Bacon was not at all careful about the fact that as a writer he must impart something to the reader, and therefore you will find that he has been a moralist also. But then this moralism, or this moralistic style, is imbued with implicit pragmatism or utilitarianism. This you need to talk about. Sometimes what do they ask you is, they ask you, do you think that Bacon's essays are the advice of Machiavelli, or they are the Machiavellian counsels? Do you agree? Now in that case you have to say the same thing, or write an essay on the pragmatism in Bacon's essays, or bring out the utilitarianism in the essays of Bacon. You have to write the same answer, but then you have to say that when Bacon was writing or giving the pragmatic suggestion to the people, he was simply describing how men behaved in practical life. He was not crooked at all, and therefore it will not be a justice to call him a Machiavellian prince. Machiavellian prince in the sense that he has given only the crooked advice to the people, which will, which will, which will malign the society, or which will bring only malice and defame or disgrace to a person or to the society. So this you will discuss under the head utilitarianism. Although, as I said, everything must be supported by the idea which are the part of your essays. You cannot and should not make any statement in vacuum, because this way, otherwise you will tend to be very impressionist. You will say, I have found this essay is very beautiful, or the Bacon's style is remarkable for brevity, but then you don't say anything as to how he has tried to bring about, or how he has tried to incorporate this element of brevity into his essays. Right, so that is one very prominent topic as far as Bacon is concerned, and the subtopic related to this is pragmatism in Bacon's essays, or utilitarianism of Bacon, or Bacon as a Machiavellian prince. Now, of course, on the basis of the essays that you have studied, so that would constitute, the answer would almost be the same. All right, when you attempt a little longer uh, question, not only containing some 5 6 pages, yet as you will be writing in the examination, but then attempt some 15 20 pages, some pages dealing with pragmatism absolutely in detail, some pages then in total. All right, in total means Bacon as a prose writer, or Bacon as an essayist. All right, and then write something on Bacon's style also, because when you are talking about Bacon as an essayist, you need to deal with his style as well. After having talked about this, the another significant topic as far as Bacon is concerned is Bacon's style. Bacon's style is the another significant topic from examination point of view. Now, these are the two topics that you need to prepare thoroughly. Besides, besides explanations, explanations, and comprehension questions, which I keep giving you, all right, on your common WhatsApp. Okay, thank you so much for being with me. Now, today we have completed Bacon's essays, and Bacon as an essayist also. Now, tomorrow we will see what were the salient features of the age from Renaissance to Jacobean age. Alright, so the salient features of the age from Renaissance to Jacobean age we will see tomorrow. Until then, bye bye, bye bye, have a nice day. Thank you so much.